right now at 7.
Breaking news, check out Chopper 5 live right now. Raging inferno flaring up again in just the past few minutes. This is forcing tens of thousands of people to stay shelter in place. And tonight, one of the busiest Bay Area freeways will remain closed for hours.
Plus, a pair of earthquakes rattling a lot of nerves across the Bay Area, one of them rocking the San Andreas Fault.
KPIX-5 News at 7 starts right now with this breaking news we've been following for hours now. Good evening. I'm Ken Bastida.
And I'm Juliette Goodrich in for Veronica De La Cruz. Let's get right out to KPIX-5's Andrea Borba, who was super close to the flames. Andrea.
Veronica, Juliette, Ken, take a look behind me right now. Just in the past 15 minutes, this has flared up. All of that ethanol that spilled out of the collapsed tank here at New Star is on the ground, and that is what is burning around other tanks right now. They had firefighting foam on top of it, but that fire has kicked up just in the past few minutes here, and it is now up against another tank. We know at least one of those tanks has jet fuel.
Look, you can see something leaking out of it.
We're seeing some stuff leak out of the top of this thing. This is not a great sign right now. There are firefighters down there trying to put water, but we have not seen those cooling pumps turn on yet to put water on the side of these tanks. The ethanol is all the way, I don't know if you can see that. What's burning on the ground is ethanol that leaked from that collapsed tank. That is what's burning, but it's burning right up against other fuel tanks here at the storage facility. We've been told that we may have to clear out of this area here in just a few minutes right now, but it's putting up an incredibly tall plume of smoke and some really incredibly intense flames here at the New Star facility in Crockett right now. We are looking at firefighters on the ground trying to put some firefighting foam and water on this, Ken and Juliette, but it seems like they are not making progress against this.
Andrea, I want to ask you a question. Off to the right there's a tank that looks like it may be leaking material out of the top. And we were told a little bit earlier this afternoon by Steve Hill, the public information officer, that there may be jet fuel in these adjacent tanks, and it looks that something is seeping out. Those tanks have been under intense heat for several hours, and we're wondering if that's something that could be compromised here.
You know, we were waiting for an update from Steve Hill, but yes, as he said earlier, one of the nearby tanks had ethanol and one had jet fuel. He did not specify which tank had which form of fuel in it. And yes, I do, just like you, see something running down the side and leaking out of the top of that tank closest to us, with the flame shooting on the ground and up into the air, putting up an incredible plume of smoke here, Ken. But we do not know which tank has the jet fuel and which one has the ethanol out here.
All right. And Andre, we know that you are close to the location, obviously giving these pictures to us right now, and you're a photographer. So if there's any moment you need to leave, please have safety be the top priority. But I wanted to ask you, since you've been there, when did you see this flare up? Because it's been obviously drastically changed in the last moments.
You know, it's been going on probably for the past 10 minutes, Juliette, at this point. We had seen a tiny bit of fire around the edge where the firefighting foam was covering up that ethanol. That looks promising. It looks like we've gotten some of those larger plumes of flames out, but it's right there on the edge near others. But it's been about 10 minutes, and it really picked up and got very scary. And as we said, we could see some stuff leaking out at the top of one of those tanks. We don't know exactly what that is. We've seen tremendous activity from CAL FIRE. They are warning us we may have to leave this area, but we have not been told to evacuate thus far, Juliette.
You know, part of the problem here is that this has been burning for, well, several hours, since before 2 o'clock. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so about 5 hours now this has been going off. And we don't really know, neither do the people there at News Star, what kind of damage has been incurred in terms of the piping that connects all of these tanks together. Presumably there are valve systems in there. There are piping systems underneath these things. We don't know what's been damaged, what may still be leaking, what other tanks may now be leaking into this fire that continues to reignite it, and you know how long this could go on. This could go on all night.
It absolutely could go on all night. That's why I-80 could be closed for hours on end. Confire PIO Steve Hill did say that the tanks are all connected by pipes. We do not know which ones are damaged at this point, and if that damage is leading to stress on tanks that were previously not affected. There's a lot of questions right now. We are waiting for an update, but we are watching this incredible scene out here in Crockett right now. It looks like some of the more intense flames have finally calmed down, but we're still seeing some tremendous smoke coming up.
We've seen that before.
Yeah, and obviously the shelter in place continues with warnings in effect for people in Crockett, Rodeo, and other communities in the area. And I'm just curious, obviously they're going to give us new information just as soon as possible, but in terms of the responders and that response you're seeing in that area, what's going on? What's being done right now?
I'm going to have photojournalist Alex Montano zoom in. Through the smoke, there is actually fire trucks and fire engines down there near where that flare-up has just kind of been gotten under control. They have been putting water on it, but at this point, I still have not seen the Newstar's cooling equipment that they were shooting on the outside of those tanks earlier kick on, and I would imagine that in a flare-up like that, you would want that to kick on, but we have not heard from Newstar, we have not heard from CAL FIRE, but there are firefighters down there doing some heroic work right now, Juliet, in some incredibly hot and dangerous conditions next to jet fuel and ethanol, and who knows what else is in those tanks.
You know, if you're just tuning in, if you just got to the TV tonight, I'm going to recap for you real quickly. This is started up about 2 o'clock this afternoon, and what we heard was there were several explosions, according to Contra Costa Fire, several big explosions that rocked the ground. And what they found there earlier this afternoon was one tank was completely collapsed, the other looked like it had exploded, and we were told that there were several 100,000 gallons of ethanol that was burning off. And of course there was the what you would think the natural response would be, which was the Newstar people there who run that facility were reacting with their stabilizing spray that was cooling down the fire, and Contra Costa showed up. This thing has gone down and looks like it's out. They have mixed water with foam. Looks like it was extinguished only a few minutes later to come bursting back up again, like we saw about 10 minutes ago. Another flare-up. It's been on and off that way all afternoon. There's been a shelter in place for a wide range of Crockett and Rodeo. Interstate 80 is closed from Highway 4 to the Carquinez Bridge in both directions. And we're not out of the woods yet. This is still burning.
Yeah, and as we're looking at the facility there, the Newstar facility, learning obviously information as we go along on this, 74 terminals and storage facilities nationwide, and that store distributes crude oil, refined products, specialty liquids. So when we talk about the materials inside there right now, we're talking about gasoline, diesel, aviation fuels, ethanol, everything. So obviously there's that concern, and what they were trying to do is cool the tanks, but pretty hard to do when it flares up again. So Andrea, where you are right now, obviously in close proximity, is there a smell? Do you have to have your masks there just for the concern of all of the gases that are going into the air? Kind of what's going on directly where you are?
Well, Juliet, the wind has shifted, and earlier where we were getting hit in the face pretty significantly with the smoke from this fire, it has shifted and the wind is pushing it toward the bay right now. So I'm feeling just fine. I haven't had to hit my inhaler again like I did earlier in the day, but the shelter in place is still in place for a reason, because an absolute large plume of smoke just went over us and up and over us to the east and is headed over the hill right now, and that does not look fun to breathe.
How far away are you right now? The camera's a little deceiving because it can zoom in, but how far back are you, and do you feel anything, the heat at all from this thing?
You know, even at the height of this past flare-up, I did not feel any heat from this thing. I don't know, I would say we're 500 yards away, according to my photographer.
5 football fields.
5 football fields away. We're up on a hill past where the grass fire burned earlier that sparked from this fire here at the Newstar facility.
Right. And we should mention that it's kind of in a little swale. It's kind of in a little valley there where they set up these tanks at that facility, and those tanks are surrounded by a pretty large wall, a berm, a soil berm, and a lot of that material was burning in there, kind of like a swimming pool. If you pulled the plug on the tank, it just filled up the swimming pool. It was sort of burning inside that pooling area, and that's when they were able to get that foam in there and really make some progress on it. Now we're hearing warning sirens coming out. Tell us about that.
We've heard these off and on all day long out here. I think this is perhaps the 7th or 8th time we've heard the warning sirens. It's a notice for everyone around here to get inside, shelter in place, make sure that you have turned off your air conditioning, turned off your heater, anything that could be pulling air into your house from the inside. And they say even plugging up cracks in your doors and windows with damp cloths. So this stuff, whatever is burning right now, does not get inside. We believe what is burning right now is ethanol from the collapsed tank from earlier, but we have not had an update in quite some time, and Newstar is being very tight-lipped about all of this, only releasing a vague statement at this point, Ken.
Absolutely. All right, and if you're tuning in right now, you probably saw this maybe on your drive home. Thick black smoke billowing high into the sky, the haze smoke leaving some people wondering, is this health? Is my health at risk? And we're going to follow up on that with Joe Vasquez in just a few minutes, and also our other top stories, the earthquake, as if this isn't enough today. So we're going to be right back with more news after this break.
Welcome back to our live coverage. People living in Crockett and Rodeo are being told to stay indoors.
KPIX-5's Wilson Walker continues our live team coverage from Crockett right now. Wilson.
Well, the siren is just winding down. You heard it right before the break, and I can show you the interstate from up here. Now, there's a little bit of traffic sort of trickling across eastbound. I think that might just be some localized traffic they're letting out of the Crockett area that's going that direction. But as you can see, westbound, the Zampa, absolutely empty, and it's been like that since we've been up here. Now, the plume of smoke that came up right around 7 o'clock sort of drifted out this direction, which was a slight change of direction of smoke from what we've been seeing over the last couple hours. Now, I asked folks that live in this neighborhood what this afternoon has been like. Found a gentleman named by the name of Brooks Dees. He says he's lived here for a while. He's seen a bunch of incidents come out of the area just over the hill there. I asked him to describe what today was like. He said the weather was critical. Okay, he said that the fortunate event today was that the smoke was able. Okay, all right, here we go. We got the sound for you. Here is Brooks Dees. Through town.
Yes, it went up, like I said, about, I'd figured 2,000 feet from what I saw on the earlier broadcast from the helicopter views. Up, and then straight out, kind of where the remnants are, as you can see them going that way. Could have been very bad, but compared to like 10 years ago, one of the little other tanks in that little farm had blown up, and it was a naphtha release, as one reporter had mentioned it accurately, and that was problematic. But
just
because of the air, just because of the weather.
Okay, now in the sort of waning daylight hours here in Crockett, the streets were pretty deserted, with the shelter in place kind of lingering, despite the fact that you couldn't really smell it, and the smoke had wound down at that point in the day. Streets were empty. Something else to know is that all of the byways out in this area are a total mess as people try to make their way around without the interstate open. 4 and 12, all the crisscrossing highways out here, if you have been in them, you know they're kind of a disaster right now as people try to make their way home in the midst of all of this. And as we've been showing you, the fire not quite giving up over the last 15 minutes. So that's the story from here in Crockett. A lot of people just sort of sitting and waiting and hoping things wind down kind of remarkably close to where we are standing. We are live in Crockett. Send it back to you.
All right, Wilson Walker reporting live for us. Thank you, Wilson.
All right, meteorologist Darren Peck is here now. We're seeing all the smoke go straight up, but it's got to be also going into maybe the Central Valley, or where is it headed now?
At the higher elevations, it's kind of going off towards the northeast, which means if it held together, it'd get to the Central Valley, but it's not quite making it that far.
Okay.
I want to show you what the air quality is like right now, and as I do that, I want to point out we shouldn't put too much stock in the hour of the number. In other words, these numbers have changed wildly over the last few hours. Obviously, it's dependent on how much of a plume of smoke is coming off that fire. And for right now, the focus has shifted, whereas Benicia had the worst air quality readings being just downstream of a subtle little southwesterly flow from that smoke. Now it's Crockett in the unhealthy level for sensitive group. But again, that's just where it stands at this moment. Those numbers have changed and shifted wildly. If you've got any shelter in place for your communities, particularly in and around Crockett and right along that coastline of Contra Costa County there near where all this happened, stick with what the public officials are telling you, and we don't want to gauge it just on what the air quality reading of the hour is, but I figured it was at least worth showing you. This is the view from the Salesforce Tower looking west. Let's talk about the rest of our weather here for a minute. Daytime highs today ranged from 81 inland in Livermore to 57 at Half Moon Bay, and there's San Francisco at 67. As far as tomorrow is concerned, very similar. It'll be noticeably cooler for inland spots. Livermore, you'll go down to 74. Concord's going down to 72. And we'll see near the coast, there's San Francisco at 63. San Jose, I've got you going to 71. We get cooler tomorrow. We get windy on Thursday, but not like the strong offshore fire weather concern winds. This is totally different. The winds for Thursday are part of a weak storm that's going to try and give us some rain. So this is actually good news. If you take a look at the big picture, I want to come in for a closer view and time it out. Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Band of rain shows up here, makes it to the North Bay by Wednesday night late. By midnight, we've got a few showers through Sonoma County, and then through the 1 o'clock through about 3 o'clock time frame. Those showers try to hold together as they move across the Bay Area, but we're not going to get a lot out of that. Main thing you'll notice is by the time we get to Thursday afternoon, the breeze will pick up, it'll feel a bit cooler, and if we get any rain, it's going to happen before your morning commute on Thursday. Maybe you notice the sidewalks a bit when you step outside, but I don't anticipate it's going to have any kind of impacts on the Thursday morning commute. Just some light rain overnight, guys. That's the headline in the forecast. See you later.
All right. Darren, thank you for that. There was other news to talk about today. After decades of turning a blind eye to the boats, there is a new plan to deal with the floating homes off Sausalito and Tiburon.
Officials could give those owners a safe place to keep their boats while preserving their lifestyle. KPIX-5's Alan Martin has tonight's original report.
Sausalito, the waterfront home to bohemian artists for generations, still attracts people quite content to live not on the pricey hillsides, but as part of the flotilla on their boats anchored in the bay. Jeff Jacob adopted the anchor out lifestyle here nearly 20 years ago.
Some people are very happy out there. Some people certainly would take shelter. Homelessness is a big issue now, and this group of people are homeless but not boatless.
Jeff and other anchor out owners are pushing back against the recent effort to get these boats off Richardson Bay.
Boats should not be there for years and years and years, especially boats that aren't seaworthy.
Larry Goldsband, executive director of the Bay Conservation and Development Commission, the agency that oversees everything on and in the bay, says that after decades of turning a blind eye, the state and the Richardson Bay Regional Agency want to see all these boats that have been anchored in the bay for years gone.
The bay is not for living on. There is a bright red line. We don't put housing developments in the bay. We don't put shopping malls in the bay. We don't put movie theaters in the bay. We don't let people live on the bay, because that's not what the bay is for.
He doesn't, however, blame the boat owners for what's evolved here.
Neither, candidly, the local governments nor BCDC have adequately enforced the law over the last 20 years.
A complicating factor is the different cities that have jurisdiction on Richardson Bay. There's Belvedere, Tiburon, Mill Valley, even the county. And a while back, Sausalito withdrew from the regional agency that's supposed to oversee the enforcement efforts out on the water. While the RBRA currently studies a way to install permanent moorings for these boat owners as a way to minimize the environmental damage to the bay, many boat owners, according to Jeff Jacob, object to any oversight, let alone eviction.
So I know 40 acres and a mule is not on offer, but nobody can own the water.
Separate from the RBRA, Sausalito has removed many of the abandoned boats in its jurisdiction.
We've gotten rid of marine debris. We've gotten rid of unoccupied boats. We're down now to 18 boats, 16 of which are occupied.
Councilwoman Joan Cox says the city's new plan would get as many as 8 boats off the bay and into slips at local marinas. Sausalito approved $25,000 to start a program that subsidizes slip rental fees.
If we bring them off the water onto a slip, now they're stable and they can actually go get jobs and take care of themselves.
Jim Madden at Sausalito Yacht Harbor has signed on to take in 2 boats.
We'll find out. We'll try it. We'll find out. You know, we'll do our best to make it successful. Try it, and hopefully it works.
Meanwhile, BCDC will be watching to see if those boats disappear and others don't take their place.
The key for our commissioners is going to find out what Sausalito's solution is, how workable it is, and in what time frame it can be accomplished.
For owners like Jeff Jacob, it still might be a tough sell.
You can live on a boat, but you can't sail a house.
In Sausalito, Alan Martin, KPIX-5.
Sausalito has just approved the first 2 boats for its safe harbor program, and others are waiting for final inspections to make sure they are seaworthy.
And the city also says if a boat owner refuses to come in off the bay, it won't force them to leave. However, if a boat leaves, a new one will not be allowed to take its place.
All right, we want to get to some more breaking news right now. Just a few minutes ago, lots of you felt it. There was just another earthquake in Pleasant Hill, this time a 3.4 near 680, and it's right near last night's 4.5 quake. It struck along an unnamed fault between the Concord and Calaveras faults. 14 hours later, a 4.7 snapped along the San Andreas. That's near Hollister. Now, that quake didn't do any major damage, but it was strong enough to rattle some nerves.
Then all of a sudden, I hear the house creak, and I see the TV start to move. And then I look out the door, and I can see the truck in the driveway actually moving.
All right, and that was from Hollister, obviously the earthquake that happened earlier today. And again, if you just felt it, it is true. We did have an earthquake in Pleasant Hill, and we're going to get more reports just after this.
Want to return live now to the hills above Crockett, where we are awaiting an official live news conference to get the very latest on what's been going on there. If you're just joining us, a storage tank fire explosion has been going on this afternoon. We want to check in with Andrea Borba, who has the very latest. Andrea?
Well, Ken, Juliet, that flare-up that we saw at the top of the hour that we talked about for 10, 11 minutes, that seems to have calmed down at this point. We are awaiting a news conference. You can see right there those plumes of smoke, all of those flames are gone. We have a Steve Hill with Confire now.
60 seconds, Steve. Okay. That's over for you. No, we got to go now. We're live. We're live. Can we go now, please?
County Public Health and the CHP.
So I apologize for the delay in getting out here as promised a short while ago, but as I think you can imagine and can see from what's going on behind me here, us here, it's a fairly fluid situation. As you probably noticed that we had a flare up here just in the last 30 minutes. But we wanted to reassure people, our neighbors to the north and to the south, that we have the incident confined to the facility now. The fires are not yet completely controlled, and we're continuing to work on that. Until that happens, we have the public health threat from the smoke in the air, which is getting increasingly hard to see as it gets darker, but nonetheless it's there right now. So I've asked one of the members of our Unified Command, Ellen Dempsey, who's a hazardous materials specialist from the Contra Costa County, to talk about the health threat. And we'll also talk about the highway closures with Captain Dan Seaman here in just a second. Here's the situation with the fire, though. The fires in the two tanks that we've been talking about most of the afternoon are not yet fully contained, and they certainly are not yet extinguished. That's clear to see behind me. We're working hard on that. We're becoming less concerned about the threat to the other tanks, but nonetheless, we're keeping water on those to keep those tanks cool in an abundance of caution.
All right, you've been watching a live news conference from Crockett on the tank storage fire that's been going on this afternoon and the closure of Interstate 80 that continues tonight from Highway 4 until the Carquinez Bridge.
And you can follow this on KPIX.com. We'll have more coverage throughout the evening. Thanks for joining us.